This is the Storyworks Roundtable, where we have conversations about craft. Because becoming a successful author begins with writing a great story. Hello and welcome to this week's Storyworks Roundtable. Today, Kathryn and I are delighted to be joined by Paula Sheridan. Paula is an award-winning entrepreneur, novelist. Just can't talk. Okay. Paula is an award-winning entrepreneur, novelist, screenwriter, and author who grew up in South Africa before whisking her son to England, where she lived until 10 years ago when she and her husband moved to Spain to retire. Paula has achieved bestseller status for both her fiction and nonfiction works. Her debut novel, The Grotto's Secret, won the People's Book Prize, which sparked the idea for the Page Turner Awards. And if you haven't listened to Paula's appearance at the Roundtable last year, we did an episode all about the Page Turner Awards, which is a fantastic opportunity, and we will link to it in the show notes. So today, Paula is here to talk to us about her big project, Finding Penrose, which is a book soon to be released, which is being turned into film, and I won't say any more because we're going to go into that whole journey with Paula today. So thank you for joining us, Paula. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be back with you again.
Mm-hmm. Yes, great to see you. So tell us about Finding Penrose. I know there is a fascinating origin story to this project, so I'll just let you tell us as much of that as you would like to.
Well, first of all, the tagline is, I've said it's based on an extraordinary true story of courage and courage and hope. But also it's, I kind of go along the lines of he's lost in a world without identity, and will Penrose reclaim his past before his dark secret is revealed? And it's really all about this young guy, and I'll tell you in a minute how I've had to, what I've had to do with the story, because it's based on a true story, but there's some parts that aren't true, and we'll go into that in a minute. But it's about a young boy who is in 1920s. He's 12 years old, and he's just about to have his initiation into manhood. And for a lot of African cultures, that is the most important thing for a young man. It's very, very important. And he's just about to have this, and his father takes him out into the African plains to teach him how to hunt, because it's important. That's part of his initiation, which is in Lesotho, it was called Lobola. So he was going out, and then his father and him stumble upon some hunters. And in those days, there was a very big thing in Africa where these hunters were taking elephant tusks and rhino horn and all these really dreadful things that they were doing to animals. And obviously a lot of that's stopped now. But in sort of setting, in the setting that it's set in 1920, 1922, in fact, they stumble upon these elephant hunters, and unfortunately the elephant hunters kill his father. But it shows you in the very early stages, the setup, as we all know, as authors, we always have to set something up. So it's set up to be, this wonderful family unit. He's very, very close to his mom. He's very close to his dad. And then when this happens, his father is killed, and he's taken as a slave. And then he's taken as a slave, and he goat herds. And then a decade or two later, he's been goat herding all this time. My granny, who in real life Penrose called Miss Ad, and she comes along with a friend of hers, and they park on the side of the road having a picnic after having visited her friend's family. And Penrose steals into the back of the car. He doesn't steal, but he creeps into the back of the car and into the truck, hides in amongst their luggage, and he ends up in Johannesburg, where my gran lived. And then that's when the true story starts, because Penrose became part of my family. And then it actually goes through his this very, very important thing, because he was taken as a slave, and because of his father's, he had this traumatic event of his father being killed. He couldn't remember his past. So because he couldn't remember his past, he couldn't remember the village that he was born in, and he couldn't remember his date of birth. So for the rest of his life, and this part's true, for the rest of his life, he didn't know this. He didn't know his identity. He didn't know his date of birth. He didn't know which village he came from. He knew he was from roughly around about Maseru because some parts he remembered the Drakensberg Mountains because that's the area that he was living in. And then for the rest of his life, he never ever knew that. And at the end of his life, just before the end of his life, something happens and he remembers his past, and then my gran can take him and they can apply for his papers and his ID. Now, the only thing is that we have to really focus on is in South Africa during the apartheid years, which I have especially made the story not about the apartheid years because that was a very negative part of South Africa. And it's not a negative story. It's such a beautiful story that you couldn't have any negative stuff coming in. So it's really all about the positive side. But in South Africa, a black man walking down the street in a white area, very, very, well, there was thousands of them. They were kidnapped, well, not kidnapped, but they were thrown into police cars and they were thrown into jail if they didn't have papers. So there was a certain identity thing called the Dom Pass, and Penrose didn't have one, and he couldn't have one because he didn't remember his date of birth and he didn't remember his age. My gran, over many, many, many years, my gran kept trying to apply for papers. She kept asking about it. She kept saying all sorts of things. She tried many, many different things, but she could never, ever get his papers until this very late point in his life when he was, in his 70s. And then he got his papers, and very sadly, and I'm sorry if I'm going to get caught up in this, but I very often when I talk about this, I get tears and I cry. So I'm not going to cry now.
It's okay if you do.
Yeah, he passed away in real life. He passed away a year after getting his papers. So that part was when I started writing the story, and I was writing it sort of as a memoir, but it kind of didn't work, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But when I was actually going through that, I realized that this part, this thing that he didn't have this very important paperwork, and because of that, he was an extraordinary man because he had this courage to, he lived with our family, and every day or any day, if he needed to go down to the shops to get bread or milk, the things that we do on a day-to-day basis, you go down to the shops, you have to go down to the shops for these things, or, fruit or whatever. And every day he did that, maybe not every single day, but whenever he did that, he didn't have papers. And if the police pulled up at any time onto the side of the road and said to him, where's your papers? What's your name? Where's your papers? He would have had to say, I don't have papers. And they could have thrown him in the back of the police van, and they could have taken him to jail. So he lived this. That's why I said that's based on an extraordinary true story of courage, because it was a courage, but it wasn't a courage of him going out to fight. He wasn't an activist. He never went out to fight. He wasn't, one of these kind of people that was, wanting to do that. His courage came from deeply within, because he would go to the shops to get bread, milk, meat, whatever for the family. And he knew that this could have happened to him, but he still did it. That's the kind of courage that I'm talking about. This very quiet courage and it's a daily courage. He lived his daily life like that. So when I was writing the story and kind of getting to this point in his journey, I started realizing that this is a beautiful story, because it's a very heartwarming story. And we were talking earlier about, sort of how did the story start? Did it start as a true story, or based on a true story, or memoir? And I was telling you that I started writing it as a memoir, and I realized that it just wasn't working as a memoir, because there's so many. I first had so many true stories, like lots of little anecdotes, it was like a collection of lots of lovely things that had happened, all these lovely little things that had happened, but it was just all bouncing along nicely on the same little level. And as writers, we know we can't have things going on the same little level. We have to have this lovely big steep character arc. We have to have this lovely big story arc, and we have to have things happening in a certain way to make a dramatic narrative, a dramatic story. And so I kind of had to go back to the drawing board. I put the story out to film producers and publishers, and they said the idea is nice, but so I kind of said, okay, let's go back to the drawing board, which I did, and spent a lot more time thinking, how can I turn a story that is a true story, but how can I turn it into something that will be successful? Because the story is so important to me, because Penrose was like a grandfather to me. He was a grandfatherly figure, and he had a very long friendship with my gran, and these two people are very important to me. So how can I turn the story into something that will be successful, that will be on film? Because I do believe Penrose's story deserves a bigger audience. It deserves a wide audience. And the only way you can get a really wide audience is by a very successful book and a very successful film. So because I had written the screenplay myself, because I'm a sort of a screenwriter as well as an author, I sort of started really delving much deeper into how I could turn it into all the normal beats, all the beats that we know of. And he has to have his dark moment, has to have the climax. And so I kind of said, okay, there's a lot that I'm going to have to fictionalize. But by doing that, it's turned out to be an amazing story, and I'm very, very happy with it now. And and so now it's got legs, and it's really going somewhere now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. I would love to hear more about this everyday courage. And when you go from this series of anecdotes that are all kind of bouncing along to something that can be adapted to film with the big arc and all of the beats, how were you able to maintain the heart of the story and also dramatize those big moments that will excite a film audience,
Yeah. So what I did is, when I had the kind of the basic story, and as I was saying, it was very flatlined, and I kind of said, okay, what is really good in the story? So I took the story and said, what parts are really, really good? What parts really deserve to be heard? What parts are funny? What parts are so heartwarming? What parts are tearful? And then, okay, so I've got those parts. So I pulled out those parts. And then I said to myself, okay, let me now write a beat sheet. So I wrote a beat sheet, first of all, and had all these little bits and pieces in. And I wrote my beat sheet and said, okay, I have to have at this point, I have to have a midpoint, or I first have to have my inciting incident, my midpoint, my climax. So those are the three main big beats, and then in between you got all of the other little beats, your dark nights, your you're sort of lost in he doesn't know what to do kind of thing. So I then kind of said to myself, okay, how can I take all my true story bits and put them into this beat sheet to make sure that I do have this beautiful dramatic arc? And then once I started putting them in, I started realizing, hang on, this actually in real life, this actually happened this year, or this happened here. It didn't happened in Joburg. It didn't happen in Durban. So then I started thinking, okay, well, in order for the story to really have this constant raising of stakes, I'm going to have to change things around. So I had to do quite a bit of fiddling of the truth, and say to myself, what can I move to this point in the beat sheet? And what can I move to that point in the beat sheet to make sure that it's always this rising, always there's this rising, always this feeling of rising tension, rising, everything is getting nail biting, and it's really becoming almost in a slow burn. It's kind of really making you bite your nails. So the only way to do that was to fiddle around with the truth. Not so much the truth as in changing the truth, but fiddling around when things actually really happened. But so it's kind of the truth is all there, but I just had to move things around a little bit. And in between that, I had to make some things up. And as fiction writers, that's what we do. We love doing. We love making things up. And so I had to in between all of my good bits that I knew were truth, I had to say, okay, what can I make up? And now to make sure this beat connects to that beat and make a good transition, how do I get there? And then those parts I had to fictionalize. So always in the background, there was the basis of the truth and true things that did really happen. But then I had to just kind of weave them. I just had to do a lot of weaving. And then sometimes I put something in a place, and I had my beat sheet, and then I thought, that's not quite working. I might have to move things around. But it was a lot of, probably about 2 years of moving things around, showing people, talking to people, having a full producer look at it, having screen consultations, looking at screen editors, looking at it. And so it was going back and forward. And then eventually each time I was really, each sort of version I was writing, each draft got better and better and better until I was really happy with it, and then pitched it to film producers and got 2 film producers interested. And now we have a director interested. And at this stage, I can't announce it because he's definitely coming on board. He absolutely loves the story, spoke about it, said to me he's read it a few times. He thinks the story's got tremendous emotional potential. And really that's the most successful stories have a very good emotional, it resonates with people emotionally. And so we definitely got this film director on board, and I'm just waiting to finalize all the bits of paperwork and all of that.
Yeah.
Then I can announce it.
Wow.
So, and we also in talks with 2 or possibly 3. I'm just waiting to hear about a third, but 3 actresses. Haven't got an actor yet. Well, we got to do that. But we've got 2 actresses who are very, very interested in playing a role in the story as well. So, I think it's all very exciting.
Yeah, it is. Congratulations. That's huge. Yeah. So when you look at the book, the finished book, and you look at the finished screenplay, did you find yourself crafting the screenplay and then saying, now I want to change the book so it's the same arc, or did you create them to be companion stories but not the same?
No, I think your first point is whenever I was doing work on the book, I thought, oh, this is really good. It needs to go in the script.
Okay.
And when I was doing work on the script, I thought, oh, this is great. It needs to go in the book. So it was constantly, the 2 were constantly kind of matching each other. But in saying that, there's a lot that you can put in a book that you can't put in a script. Some of the scenes I just couldn't fit in. And because with a film script, you have to have, like a feature film, you have to go between 110 and 120 pages. And you can't go more. So I had to cut out a lot of scenes. So with the script, it was a far more of a tightening job. And I really had to make sure that I was making sure that everything was very tight and concise. And then I'd go back and look at the book and say, okay, I can leave those scenes in the book because they add a little more to, the deeper character and telling of the story, whereas it's just not going to fit in the book. So there's quite a lot of things in the book that are not in the script, but I had to make sure that the script was all the way following the beats. And that's another thing as well, is if any of your listeners are, are considering, adapting their books, and I teach a book adaptation course, by the way. But if they are considering adapting a book, you have to really be very careful with your beats, because that's one of the things that I have found in all the different pitching that I've done. I found that the producers the notes that I got back from producers would say, this beat doesn't quite hit this right page. So with a book, you can have, you can be fudge, your beats can fudge around, your different plot points can sort of be here or sort of be there roughly, as long as they're in the right direction. But with the film script, it's really got to be dead on. And that's where there's a lot of tightening needed, and also making sure that everything happens the way that it should happen in a film script. Otherwise, producers are just not interested. And that's very important for writers to know, that you have to have your beats dead on in order to make sure that when you pitch, that they're going to like your story, because the way that they read script is in a certain way, and if it falls out of the way that they read it, it just they lose it, and they just not interested.
Right. Interesting. Is that true across the board, or are the beats, structurally, not that they're the same exact beats, but across genres? Do you have a different structure depending on the genre you're in, or
No,
is film?
Yeah, I think it's all genres, I think, would be the same. It's just the story arc, how the story, all the different plot points must fall in certain places, as we know where they should fall. They've got to fall on certain pages, give or take, a page, but not even not even more, you know, 2 or 3 pages. If they fall out of the 2 or 3 pages, then it starts to, you know, they think either too long or it's too short, or, you know, something. So that's one of the things that I found, is that a lot of producers really wanted the beats to fall in the right places.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting point for writers.
Yeah, it is an interesting point. Kathryn, I'm trying to let you jump in if you want to, but so I'm kind of like, next question. But I'll just, the thing that comes to mind, I have some ancient experience playwriting, and the script is so much dialogue. There's so much white space. So when you convert a novel to a screenplay, and you're only looking at 110 to 120 pages, and then you've got these very well defined to the page beats that you've got to hit. That process, could you say a little bit about what that process is like and the kind of mind shift you need?
Yeah, well, you know, I teach this book adaptation course, which also is sort of like a screenwriting course, because I go through everything: how to adapt your book, what you can have in the book, what you can't have in the book. First of all, I go through the differences between film and book, and there's so much that you can put in the book, and you can describe your characters, and you can describe your settings and things like that, which you can't do in a script. You can also say, for example, you can say in a book, you can say, you know, she was blonde haired. I'll describe myself: blonde, curly hair, glasses, blue eyes, you know, something like that. You can't do that in a script, because let's say, for example, you know, a top director gets hold of your script, and they're reading about this character who's blonde and you know, blue eyes and glasses, but they actually want somebody completely different, and they have if they're reading the character of this particular person and this character in your story, and they have immediately, and comes to mind, and they think, oh, I can cast Jessica Chastain, for example. Well, she's not like this. Of course, you can turn her into this. You can put a blonde wig on her and give her blue eyes and give her glasses and this kind of thing. So with screenplays, it's more about the character's personality, and you describe the character's personality in one, you know, the first time you ever introduce the character, you introduce the character, and it's always, the character's name is always the first time in capital letters. You introduce them, and you introduce them as so you would describe, let's say, for example, you're describing Paula, you would call her a chatterbox, or you'd call her feisty, or you'd call her whatever she is. If she's quiet, calm, you know, whatever her personality is, you would describe that person that way, rather than describing the actual character. So little things like that is very important in adapting a book to a screenplay. There's lots of other things as well that is very, very important, and it's a very big subject. And I have a boot camp which I teach, and I do it for about a week. So every day we have 2 or 3 hours every day, because it's such a big subject. It's such an important subject for you know, if somebody wants to adapt their book. Otherwise, I mean, you know, it's especially for independent writers, it's very hard for them to be able to afford to have it adapted, because screenwriters charge so much. You don't even want to know how much. But yeah, so because of that, it's a very heavy subject. So, you know, I mean, I'm very, you know, I can give you my details of the course that I run, but there's so much involved, and it's a very, very different storytelling formula, but it still comes back down to the same thing, which is all about character. And if it's about plot, then that's fine. You can also bring in the plot, but it's really all about the story arc. There's certain things have to happen just the same in a book. Your first turning point, your midpoint, your climax point, and the resolution. All of these things that we know as writers, all of those things have to be fitted into a screenplay as well.
Yeah, we will definitely share a link to your course in the show notes. So I'm sure there are a lot of listeners who are going to be interested in that.
And in actual fact, it's quite interesting, because I've mentored some writers through book adaptation as well, and I've had 2 of them who are now, they completely new at screenwriting, never written a screenplay before, and they now winning awards. So obviously small awards, as they build up to pitching their scripts, they're getting small awards. So that's really good that you can actually go from not knowing anything about writing a screenplay to, pitching your story into screenplay contest and actually winning some awards. So that's very good. It's also very confident building for these writers that I've mentored.
Right. And we had Tim Auld on, and he was one of the Page Turner Award winners in 2023, the year.
Yeah.
Yes. And so he's done that. He has been entering his screenplay into contests and building awards, and I think it's been optioned and is in rewrites. I think he spoke about that on the show. So more podcast episodes people can go look for. Yes.
Yeah, it's fabulous. Yeah, it was lovely to see because we run an online for Page Turner Awards. We run an online event, and it was lovely to see him getting so excited when he won. That's one of the best things about the whole. We work so hard the whole year, and the best thing is just we know who's going to win, and we see their faces, and then we watch for them, and it's lovely to see when they get so excited to win.
Definitely. Kathryn, I'm letting you go.
Oh, no, it's good. It's fascinating to listen to that journey, memoir, mixing the truth around. And then the fact that you were writing the book at the same time as the screenplay, that feels like a lot. So you mentioned that you were fiddling around with it for about 2 years. How long has this book been in process for you? How long has this story been in process?
The story for the actual written part has been for 2 years, but this is going to sound very weird. It's about 40 years too late. 40 years, after, because what actually happened is when I was 20, I said to Penrose, I was first writing, I was living in South Africa in Durban, and I had I wrote off to England. I wasn't living in England then, wrote off to London somewhere, and I wrote off to a long distance course. And I got this lovely big blue book, creative writing, had all my exercises and all my kind of stuff that I was doing to learn creative writing. And I was and I was living with my gran at the time. I had started my first job, and my parents lived far out of town. So I was living with my gran so that I could get into town much quicker catching the bus. And Penrose was there, and he was saying to me, "What you doing, Paula?" And he was looking at what I was doing. And I told him all about it. I'm going to be a writer one day and write stories. And I said to him, "I'm going to write your story, Pen. I promise you." I called him Pen or Penny. "I'm going to write your story, Penny." And he said, "Oh, there's not much to tell." And I said, "There's loads to tell. I want to tell your story." Anyway, I should have sat down there and then and got it all out of him, because there's so much that I didn't know. When I finally got around to writing it was 2 years ago. So it was like 40 years after now that the story is actually going to be published. It's 40 years after my promise. So at least I have, stuck to my promise, but it's taken me 40 years. But it's not that the story's taken 40 years to write. It's about 2 years ago, my mom was visiting me. She still lives in South Africa. She was visiting me. And I was just saying to Mom, I've over the years, I've written little bits about Penrose, little bits that I can remember. And tell me about what happened then, and remember this in time, and what happened at that, this particular. And I was going through all these events and these happenings, and where did he go from here to there, and all this. And I was saying, and why couldn't he remember? Why, all this kind of stuff, and why didn't he want to talk about his past? And so, by talking through all of this with my mom, and I'm, dedicating the book to my mom for the time that she spent, and she gave me so many little stories, and she told me lots of true stories, the beautiful true stories. I mean, and a lot of the true stories that I've included in the book, and all of these stories is when I started getting all of the little, what I was saying to you earlier, all the little anecdotes together. So I started putting that together, and that was very easy. That came very quickly. So I had that down in like, I don't know, 2 or 3 months. That was done. And then I thought, okay, I've got a book. And I thought, great, 2 or 3 months. Best book I've ever written. Wonderful. I'm going to write more of these. And then that's when the hard work started, because it's probably been the hardest book, because I've had to adapt. I've had to take true characters, real life characters that I love and that were very special to me. And I have to take those characters and remain true to them. And that has been my mission all along. I didn't want to fictionalize them. I didn't want to make them to be people that they weren't, because that's important, that they are who they are. So that part was to make sure that they the characters stayed true all the way through. And a lot of those lovely true stories that I was telling you about and how I built those true stories through the beats, I was also making sure that I was keeping a lot of those. So by trying to see what I could have in the story that was true and what I had to make up, and trying to transition from scene to scene, but all the time, and then moving things around. Like I was telling you earlier, some things didn't work. They might have happened in Joburg, but I had to make it happen in Durban, or whatever, because of the way the story fitted. And so that part was very, very hard. So it was actually probably the hardest thing I've had to write, even though I thought after 3 months, great, I've got a book written. So from then, it's been about 2 years of working it and reworking and really getting those beats, just making sure those beats all fitted in the right places and making sure it all worked. So yeah, it's been about 2 years, and then now it's all really coming together with the script coming together and starting to get people involved, and film producers and directors and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I appreciate that you said that that's some of the hardest writing that you've done. I think, I don't know, at least for me and some of the other writers I know, there's always somebody who says, oh, you should write their story, or you should write their story because their life has been so fascinating.
Yeah.
And they don't understand what they're asking. It's like, yes, their life is fascinating. It is not yet a book. And the amount of work that it takes to go from truth to fiction.
Yeah. And I've got some writers that I mentor, and I've said to them, one of the things that I do, and I'm actually doing on my Kickstarter campaign, which I'm launching in June, is I'm offering writers the chance to be mentored on the same path that I've been on. So they can be mentored to show from their book to the adaptation, and then to the pitching, and to the part that I'm doing now, which is I am producing the script as well as some producers. And the only reason I'm doing that, other writers don't need to do that. But the reason I'm doing that is because these particular characters are very important to me. And as I was saying to you, I wanted to make sure that they retain the true characters. What I couldn't have is a producer buying the script and saying, here's the money, buy. And then 2 years' time, or however many years' time, I see the story about my family and they are completely different. They're not the same story, or not the same characters. And then I have to live with that. So I thought, no, I can't live with that. For example, while I was just during the consultations I was having and various script editors, I had people saying to me, oh, it would be brilliant if we could throw Penrose in jail. Let's make the police catch him. The cops will catch him, and we'll throw him in jail, and his dark night of the soul will be in jail. And I was like, I can't. I just can't. So I had to. It made me realize that I have to be very much involved, not to control it, because with a script, it's a creative journey, and there's a lot you have to give up, and you have to understand that you've got so many very talented people and lots of people from the arts, and people who know what they're doing, and they will take the story to the next stages. But there's certain things that I have to be able to know that I can't do certain things, and some people were saying, well, maybe we can have a relationship between Penrose and your gran. That didn't happen. And not that I wouldn't want it to happen. It's just I have to, there's certain things, because they are my family, there's certain things I have to keep and make sure I stick to the truth. But I have said to a lot of writers that I mentor, some writers who've got a memoir or a true story that they've got out, and it is written to the truth, to the letter, everything that happened, and it's not working, it's not selling. And so, I'm saying to them, they can, I'm mentoring them, and they can actually then find out how I've taken my story, which is all true, turned it into a based on or inspired on by a true story, and then adapting that to fiction. So that's one of the things that I'm doing in my Kickstarter. I'm going to be offering that to writers. So so that they can, they can hopefully follow the same path that I'm following.
Right. So I'm interested in hearing more about being true to these people and their characters while throwing out fictional options like putting him in jail or having a relationship with your grandmother. That takes some really big and perhaps obvious choices off the table. So then you've got to find other equally compelling, dramatic choices and stay true to your family and your story. So can you say more about that process as the writer, and if there was tension or difficulty there, or, how did you find the inspiration you needed?
I think for me, I mean, I've got somebody that I'm sort of have been working with, and she was writing a story about her husband. So there's certain things that she's got to be very careful with, and things that the journey he's been on, he was fighting in different wars. I won't say too much about it, but for me, it was really a case of saying to myself, what can I, or what from my own self, my own, this thing that you have to live with yourself after the story. So to live with myself, what can I fictionalize? And to live with myself, what can't I fictionalize? And when I kind of understood that, and that's a very difficult process, and it doesn't come straight away. It doesn't come overnight. It takes a lot of reworking and working and saying, could I do this? But just doesn't sit right with me. But why doesn't it sit right? How can I work around that? How can I make sure that I've still got this character arc or the story arc, and still have this massive dramatic moment? And by doing that, by constantly working, through these plot points, I found that I could get to that stage. And I think anybody can. You just have to and I've got another writer that I'm working on who's got a war story. I think you just have to say to yourself, what are you happy? And also, I think it also depends if the person that you're writing about is alive or dead. My granny and Penrose have both passed, although my mom is still with us, and my mom has told me a lot. So I had to then say to myself, what can I say about them? But also, what would they be happy with? That I felt that to me, because it's these two people that I love very much, I had to know that in myself, the story that I was telling, would my gran sitting up there in heaven and Penrose sitting up there beside her, would they be happy with the story I was telling? And if there was some things that didn't feel right, it meant it wasn't right to go in. So that's kind of where I was sort of saying to myself, this works because I feel comfortable with it, and I think they'd be proud, and I think they'd be happy with it, and therefore I think it can go in. Other things that kind of just didn't feel right, I would just work around, chew on, or just try and see how I could fit it in. And then if it still wasn't working, then I'd have to say, okay, it's got to go. So it's a very hard decision to make, but I think only you as the writer can make that decision. And then you have to sort of see where it goes from there.
Right. And I think your story reminds us as well, that just because something presents itself as likely, like Penrose ending up in prison or in jail, it doesn't mean that's the only option. I can see why people would go there, because you think, well, it would be so easy for that to have happened because he didn't have the documents every time he left home.
Yeah.
Right. So then as the writer, it's like, okay, yes, that's probable, but that doesn't mean it's the only option or it's the best option. And then it's our job to do that work of finding other possibilities and figuring out what could be equally dramatic, but not that.
Yeah, and it's actually funny because the first script editor who was reading it, he kept saying to me that all the time, he kept thinking, oh my God, he's going to be caught, he's going to be put in jail, he's going to be put in jail, and then it kind of didn't happen. And I said to him, okay, so was that a good or bad thing? And he said, no, he said it was a lovely thing, because I was kind of hoping it wouldn't happen, but I was sort of telling myself it's inevitable, it's got to happen because of his situation.
Yeah.
But then the way that I did it is I had him in a situation which was fictionalized. Some parts. So in South Africa at a certain time, around about the 1985, 86, 87 time, there was a lot of uprising. There was a lot of mobs. There was a lot of rioting because they were trying to stop, very rightly so, they were trying to stop this Dom pass. It had been in existence for far too long. it was just bad that you couldn't go in and out of everywhere you went. You had to have this Dom pass, and you had to carry it on you. And they didn't want to have this, a lot of different cultures didn't want to have this Dom pass anymore. And so there was a lot of rioting and mobs and various things going on. Not nice things, but these things had to happen. It was a movement that eventually stopped this Dom pass. And so I thought to myself, well, maybe what I can do is to fictionalize a scene where Penrose gets caught up. So he has his dark night of the soul. He's all is lost, and he realizes that he has to hand himself in. They just and that's also part of the hero's journey. I had to make it that he was the hero. He had to hand himself in. So off he goes, and he decides to hand himself in. So his dark night of the soul is all about my family, who is our family, my gran and the family, all of us. He's putting us in jeopardy. So he decides he's going to go and hand himself in. And at that very moment in time, there's a whole lot of, riots and mobs, and somebody's trying to get in the door. I hope you can't hear that, but probably one of my cats scratching the door. But there's a whole lot of mobs and all this kind of stuff going on. And he goes off to the police station to hand himself in, and he gets caught in this mob. And at that time as well, a friend of the family, I'll never ever forget this. A friend of the family had a petrol bomb thrown into his car. He was going. He was in the army, and he was going to he was sort of going between one army station and the other, and he had a petrol bomb thrown. So what they did is they put petrol in a bottle and light it, and they threw it in his car, and he wasn't killed, but he was very, very, very badly injured. I mean, his hands were like big balloons, both his hands. His face was he was very badly burnt. And of course, with the petrol, it just kept burning his skin, kept burning him. So I kind of remembered, and it was actually quite a very strange thing, because when I was writing that, I was trying to get something, a really good dramatic climax scene, but without putting Penrose in jail, because I didn't want to do that. And so I was thinking, how could I do that? And then suddenly it just came to me. I had forgotten about this guy, and I'd forgotten about this thing happening to him. And then suddenly one day I was writing, and I just suddenly thought of this guy, and I thought, oh God, remember what that happened? And I thought, when did that happen? And I looked back, and it was actually around about exactly the same time. And it fell at about the same time that this is happening in the story. And I researched it and found that it was the exact. That's what they were doing. They were writing because they wanted to get rid of this Dom pass, and all the pieces of puzzle just fell into place. And I said, right, that's what I can do. So I fictionalized a character that Penrose had become very friends with from a young boy, and he's a white guy, and his family are racists, and so I fictionalized that Penrose gets very friendly with this guy, and this guy then grows up and becomes a policeman, and as a policeman, so I changed it slightly. The guy that really happened to in real life was an army guy, so I changed it slightly to be a policeman. And in the mob, and all this happening in the mob, it's a policeman, and these guys, Penrose gets caught up in this mob, and he's the petrol bomber is about to throw this petrol bomb, and Penrose runs and stops the white guy who's become his friend, and he saves him. And that is the moment then, because of all this happening, Penrose gets thrown against a tree, hits his head badly, and the memories start coming back. So over the whole story, there's certain little things that he always remembers. He always remembers some little things, but they're kind of like ghosty things in his past. And then when this big climax moment, he now starts remembering everything, and it all just suddenly comes back to him, all very quickly. Quick. And it was lovely writing that, because I was writing it with intercuts. So you can imagine in a film that you're seeing the real thing happening now, and then you're seeing something very similar happening back to when it was happening in his past. So, and I was sort of matching the two up together to have this very, very fast cut sort of climax scene. And then he remembers everything, and then he goes and he gets his papers. But then there's also the very sad part at the very end that he passes away. And I don't want to talk about that, because I will definitely start crying. I was talking to somebody the other day, and I was in tears. So
Mm.
And it's actually quite, it's amazing that, even as the writer, I still get very emotional writing that particular scene where my gran comes and finds him passed away.
Oh,
We
wow.
better talk now quickly because I'm going off.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm wondering if Penrose, either in real life, I guess in both real life or the book, ever got to go back to his birth village. And
That's what, you see, I'm really going to cry. That's what made
oh,
it so important, is because at the end, my gran is taking him. They're both old, an old couple, not a couple, but an
mhm.
old couple. And she's got the car running, and she gets all the maps out, and she's taking him back to show him his village. And she doesn't know why he's not coming. She toots the horn, and she goes and she finds him in his room, and he's passed away.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so it's tremendously emotional. That's why I can't
Yeah.
help crying every time I do it. And actually, the director, when he was talking about it, it brings tears. Men and women, it'll bring tears to people's eyes. It's a very, very, it's a high emotional point. But yeah, so it was unfortunate. It was only a year later that my gran wanted to take him back in real life. My gran wanted to take him back, and she was talking about it, trying to work it out. She was much older then. She was in her 70s, and it wasn't very easy. As I've written in the book and in the script, it sort of seemed very easy that she could just get in the car and off they can go. But at that age, it wasn't as easy as I've made it out to be. And in real life, it wasn't very easy for her to take him back. But they were planning on doing that, and then he passed away.
Mm. Wow. Yeah,
Very
very
powerful story.
poignant.
It really is
It is a powerful story.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Before we talk about the Kickstarter, any other questions about the adaptation or things, Kathryn, questions, Paula, things you want to share before we jump into the Kickstarter?
I'm good.
Just eager to read the book and watch the film,
Yeah,
right?
for sure. Yes.
Yes.
And both of you will have to tell me at what points you cry.
Okay. We
I
will.
love a good
that.
tearjerker. I'm on it.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, at this point in your journey, you've got the book ready to publish, but you haven't published it yet because that's part of the Kickstarter campaign. And you've got producers and an interested director and some interested actors. And so tell us a little bit about this present phase of the journey, the Kickstarter, and let us know how people can support you as well.
So the reason I've never done this is my first Kickstarter, and let me tell you how much work it's been. And probably if somebody wants to do a small Kickstarter, I don't think that'll be as much work. But because the story has got the potential to really, change lives, it's got the potential to be, it's really touch people and move people. And the potential to become a film. And because of that, it's a much bigger project for me. And so I've been working on it for solidly, and I mean solidly. I mean, I haven't had a weekend off for 3 months. Oh, I'm lying. About a week ago, I had half the Sunday off. My husband and I went away he said, "Come on, you got to get away from your computer." And we went and had a lunch Sunday afternoon. But I've been working solidly on this Kickstarter campaign. So I've been trying to make it as immersive as possible. So first of all, the reason I'm doing it as a Kickstarter is because the book is ready to be published. Everything's ready to go. I'm offering readers a chance to have to be a named character in the book, and I'm also offering them the chance to dedicate the book to somebody because it's such a special story and a very powerful story. These are the kind of things that I can do. And there's lots of other things that I'm offering. I'm offering for writers mentorships, my Kickstarter plan, very just a document where you can take exactly what I've done and do the same kind of things so you can replicate it for yourself. All these kind of things that I'm doing, and a lot of them are digital. And the reason I'm doing a lot of digital, because we all know if we have a printed book, we have to pay for that and it has to be shipped. So there's costs. And that's fine because that's got to be, and I'm doing a special edition with foil, gold foil and all of that. And that's great for readers. But then I wanted to offer digital. And the reason for offering a lot of digital rewards is because the money that comes in from those digital rewards, I won't keep. That money, I'm going to seed fund the film because I'm so determined to get this story. It really is such a powerful story and it deserves to be heard. And Penrose's story deserves to be heard, not because it's me writing it. It's his story. It's all about him and his life. And because of that, because of my determination and my mission to get the story into a film, I will then take that money and I will use it to get casting directors. I was talking to you earlier about the casting director to get the particular casting director that we've been talking to. It's 15 grand for him to approach one actor. So the money that I get from the Kickstarter will then go to putting into the film. And then obviously by doing that, I'm producing the film. I already told you about why I'm producing, because I want to protect these characters and make sure I'm sort of, around and involved with the film so that I can protect these people that I love. And then also by doing this, I will put money into the film. I will make sure that the film gets made because I am so determined to do that. And that's the reason I started thinking about, well, instead of just launching it as a book, how can I launch it in such a way that it gets a much bigger audience and in such a way that it has the chance to earn a good bit of money, not for me, because I don't need, another holiday in wherever. It's because I want to put this into a film and the money that I'm going to have, one thing I will do is I will get an audiobook. So the first bit of money that comes in from the Kickstarter, I will get an audiobook made so that people who can't read, they can still listen to it. And that's important for diversity. I want everybody to be able to listen to the story. So I'll get an audiobook made, and then thereafter, I'm just going to be really hoping for as much money as possible and really trying to reach a very wide audience as possible to be able to put money into the film, because that is my big project. Is I'm seed funding the film, and I'm on a quest to fund the film. So because of that, that's one of the reasons why I've been working so hard. I've built a website. I've got planningpenrose.com. I built a website. I've been reaching out to celebrities, asking them to endorse the film and commit to certain things. My marketing campaign is just ongoing all the time. I'm looking at different ways I can advertise the story, different ways I can reach out to influencers. So there's so many different things that normally on a normal small book kind of thing, or a normal book. When I say normal, obviously I'm not saying that this is any more important. I'm just saying I'm going to do Kickstarters for some of my other books, and I will just do it as a much smaller project. But because this is going to hopefully become a film, and already it's got the legs to become a film, because of that, I'm going the extra mile. I'm really making sure I do a lot more. And my marketing plan has kind of sort of been in play for the last month already. I've been doing so much to reach out to try and make sure that my Kickstarter can reach millions of people, so that lots of people see the rewards I've got, and the rewards I'm trying to do as many digital things as I've said, so that it's not actual physical things that I have to send and physical things I have to pay for, but the digital stuff like the mentorships and a lot of those things, the money will come to me, but it won't come to me. The money will come to me, but it'll go straight to the film. So it's just kind of a way that I thought of doing this. And when we've got a good fair amount of money, then the producers can actually take the money that we've got, and then we can go and we can approach lead, actors. Because the other thing about a film, it doesn't really get produced until you've got a director on board and you've got a couple of lead actors. If you've got your 1 or 2 or 3 lead actors, then you can go, the producers can take it to the film funders and the financiers, and they can say, okay, we've got this actor, we've got this director, we've got these people on board. Now we want so many million to make the film. And so because of that process, I'm actually putting the Kickstarter money into the film. Even though the Kickstarter is about the book, because I can't offer anything. It's a weird thing, because I can't offer anything in the film. I can't say you can come to the film's opening or anything like that, because there is no tangible film at this stage.
Right.
So further down the line, if we're a bit short of money, I could possibly do another Kickstarter campaign. But right now, this kind of thing is my mission, to get the story into, to actually I suppose you could call it kickstart the film. So
Sure.
that's what I'm doing. So that's why I've worked my butt off, so to speak.
Definitely. Yeah, I love that this is a passion project, that it's coming so clearly from the heart, and that
Yeah.
getting the film made isn't just about seeing your story reach a wider audience, about seeing Penrose, this real person,
Yeah.
and your grandmother, this real person, who are part of your family and part of such an interesting span of time in such a fascinating place in the world, in our human history. I think there's so much to the story that's really coming through in the conversation, and that supporting you and supporting Penrose is a special opportunity. Is there anything you want to say to listeners about what this support means, or what they're really supporting by supporting Finding Penrose, the project?
Well, by supporting Finding Penrose, the project, they will certainly be helping to bring a very important and a very powerful story to life, because that's really what it's all about. They will be helping to bring it to life. They will be there in on this journey with me to bring it to life. But also, I think from a writer's point of view, I think the kind of message that I would like writers to take away from what they've been listening to today, even if they don't come and support my Kickstarter campaign, or they never hear of me again, is just really, if you have something that is so important to you and so deeply rooted, don't be afraid of bringing that story out. Find a way to make that story get heard, because that's really what I've been going through is, from, I was telling you, from when it was just all flat planed and it was just this flat, plain old story, to building that arc and everything that I've had to do. Make sure that you do those things, whatever it is you have to do. You make sure you do what was comfortable and what you need to do, or you feel, feels right. But do it, because these stories, whatever, I mean, not just this story, because it's about courage and hope and adversity and resilience, but it might be a completely different kind of true story, because there's so many good, beautiful human stories. I mean, my husband and I love, whenever we see based on a true story or inspired by a true story, bang, that's what we're watching tonight. We love these things because it's all about humanity. It's about us as humans, and it's about us as people and cultures and all the things that we've had to go through from years ago, Penrose's time, decades, centuries ago, to now. And this particular story, I think, is very powerful, because a lot of what happened to Penrose 100 years ago, 50 years ago, is still happening in today's society. And it does make me wonder if humanity will ever learn. And that's a whole subject we can talk about. And I really get on my horse about that, or my soapbox about that. But I think just from a writing point of view, if a writer has something that they know is a true story, and they really want to get the story out, and they really believe in that story, but they don't know how to get it out, just work through it. Take the confidence from the belief in the story and the passion of the story, and just find a way to do it. You just got to do it, because there's so many beautiful stories out there, and those stories need to be heard. Those stories need to come to the surface. And that's probably a very important message for writers, to make sure that they do that. And if they do want to, if there's anybody listening who does want to, support my Kickstarter campaign, I'd be very, very happy to have them, and they can ask me any questions, and I'm very happy to be flexible, and to see how I can help writers to sort of on the same journey that I've been on, because God, it's so damn exciting. It really is exciting, and it's very exciting from an independent writer's point of view, because you can see that these things can happen. We always hear about these writers who get these massive big 6-figure sums, and their books are auction, and everybody wants to know it, and the film rights are sold, and all this kind of stuff, foreign rights, and all of this sort of thing. And and independent authors just don't get that chance. So it can happen. It really can happen. If you really believe in your story, it can happen. It just absolutely can happen.
We've got a unique opportunity to help Paula turn Finding Penrose, the book, into Finding Penrose, the movie. Check out her Kickstarter campaign. There is a link in the show notes right at the top of the page at storyworkspodcast.com/Finding Penrose. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me. And it's been lovely talking to you. And it's lovely talking about Penrose's story. And I'm sure you can see it means so much to me. And I'm very passionate about it. So, yeah.
Oh,
and if
definitely.
there's any writers who hear about this and believe in a story and know that they've got a very good story, they can just come and talk to me, because I really believe that these stories out there should be heard.
Thank you for listening to the Storyworks Roundtable. Find all our shows, show notes, and videos at storyworkspodcast.com.